Hi, Dr. Kevin Windisch from Sparks Pediatric and Adolescent Medicine again. Welcome to our video series for both parents and students. Please remember that these videos are not intended to replace visits to our office, and we can't treat you over the telephone or over the internet. If you have specific concerns, we're happy to see you here in our office. Just give us a call at 775-359-7111. Today what we want to talk about is the process of FDA approval, and what exactly does that mean, and what does the phrase off-label prescribing of medication mean? Because these things really confuse patients, and the insurance companies manipulate it to their benefit and really rely on the confusion of the patients in order to save them some money and perhaps deny better medical care. When a pharmaceutical company has a drug that they would like to bring to market, they perform a series of studies to prove both the safety and the efficacy of the drug, the delivery device, and the dosing schedule that they're planning on using. They will do this for a specific disease process in a specific group of patients. For example, they will bring a drug to market looking at age 26 to 30-year-old or 26 to 50-year-old premenopausal females for breast cancer. And the FDA will review that drug and that data, and they'll say the drug is safe, it's effective, and we will approve it. Once it is approved, that drug can be used for anything. But it will be labeled as 26 to 50-year-old females for breast cancer. So if you're using it for testicular cancer, that would be off-label. If the drug is used for a patient age 26 to 50-year-old male with breast cancer, that would be off-label. If it's used in a 25-year-old and 325-day-old female with breast cancer, that's still off-label because the labeling is specifically for women 26 plus 0 days of age and up to 50. Is that a good thing to do off-label? Well, it sort of depends. Okay? And a perfect example is that I'm going to throw out, there's a drug called Risperidone. Risperidone hit the market in the early 1990s. It was used for years as an antipsychotic. It was a great antipsychotic. We used it for schizophrenia. We used it for diseases like that, and patients did very well with it. A number of lives were positively altered because of it. We discovered along the lines that it was very useful in autism and autistic states, but it was off-label for years and years and years and years. And it was only 3 or 4 years ago, today being August of 2011, that the drug was actually FDA approved for use in autism. The manufacturers of the drug gathered the data that had been collected over the years, brought it back to the FDA, and received permission to change the label and include autism in there. As soon as they did that, they were then able to get permission from the FDA to market to neurologists. Prior to that, they could market to psychiatrists, and they could market specifically in all their marketing. Of course, the phone waits for a video. They could market in all of their materials for schizophrenia only. Now, once they had that second stamp of approval, they could market to neurologists and developmental pediatricians, and they could include on their patients with autism within the age range that it was approved for. And I think it was ages 2 and up. Maybe it was 6 and up. Prior to that, was it wrong to use the drug? Well, there were tons of articles and tremendous amount of empiric data that the drug was both safe and effective and better than some of the alternatives for use in autism. But it was off-label by definition. Okay, once a drug, so you need to understand that. The other thing that you need to understand is a drug is name brand only when it first hits the market. The manufacturer who brought it to market is the only one who can make it. After X number of years, and that length of time can be extended, the patent can be extended for any of a number of reasons. But after a specific length of time, the patent will expire and the drug becomes generic and other manufacturers can make the drug. Once a drug goes generic, nobody is going to submit materials to the FDA for extension of the FDA approval, because there's no money to be made in a generic medication, and that process costs anywhere between $50 and $100 million. So they're not going to spend the money to extend the indications for something, or expand the indications for something for which there is no patent. So, for example, if somebody were to come up with a new use for amoxicillin, that'll never receive FDA approval, because nobody's going to bring it in front of the FDA, even though amoxicillin is a 175-year-old drug. Lasix, Tylenol, aspirin. These are all drugs for which you're never going to see changes in FDA approval, because nobody's going to bring that in front of the FDA and spend that kind of money when the drugs are already generic and there's no money in the name brand market. Insurance companies will manipulate this, however, and they'll tell you it's experimental because it's not been FDA approved. Just because it's not FDA approved doesn't mean it's experimental. There's been experiments that have been done. I mean, it could be experimental. I could come up with an experimental protocol for amoxicillin tomorrow, but most of the uses, even if it doesn't have an FDA label, have already been proven by a preponderance of empiric data. And in most physicians' offices, my office included, we're not doing anything experimental. It's all proven by empiric data that's been compiled over the years. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the FDA has granted their seal to it. But the FDA makes their decisions based off of a whole bunch of things, including financial and political decisions, not necessarily scientific decisions. So whether something's been approved or not for a specific indication really has nothing to do with whether there's any evidence to its safety or its lack of safety, or evidence to its efficacy or its lack of efficacy. So the FDA stamp doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. I'm going to give some specific examples in a second, but I want to take kind of a side note and say that case law demonstrates that you can't even hide behind FDA approval or lack thereof to defend a malpractice claim. And the perfect example was a case of an asthmatic who died. I wish I knew the name of the case. This goes back years ago. The physician involved withheld albuterol because it was not FDA approved in this age range, and you will see later we're going to talk about FDA approval for albuterol. It was not FDA approved for use in this patient group. The child died. The parents sued and recovered. The court said that the physician needed to be aware of all appropriate off-label indications for a drug and use it appropriately off-label as well. So the fact that the FDA didn't grant its stamp of approval did not protect the physician who refused to use that drug. I'll let that point sink in. Okay, one more time. Lack of FDA approval does not protect you from refusal to use a life-saving drug, if it's appropriate. So you need to know all of the evidence, whether the FDA has given it a thumbs up or not. Their stamp doesn't mean much. So let's look at albuterol and levalbuterol. Okay, levalbuterol, the less toxic single isomer, in nebulized form is FDA approved for ages 6 and up, as of this date, August 8th, 2011. However, the metered dose inhaler, the exact same chemical, is FDA approved for ages 4 and up, 2 years younger. Well, wait a minute. Nebulizers are a little easier to give to kids than are metered dose inhalers. So why is that? I don't know. It's just the data that was brought in front of the FDA. Now here's the real beauty, okay? Racemic albuterol, the more toxic enantiomer of Xopenex, in the form of Ventolin, has been FDA, so Namebrand only, has been FDA approved for ages 4 and up. Generic albuterol, to be given via a nebulizer, is FDA approved for ages 4 and up. However, Acuneb, name brand albuterol, for a nebulizer is FDA approved for ages 2 and up. More than once, I've written a prescription for Xopenex and been told the insurance will not approve it because it's off-label in a 2-year-old. I say, what do I need? They say, you need Albuterol. I say, are you going to give my patient Acuneb? No, we're going to give them generic Albuterol. Well, generic Albuterol is only FDA approved for 4 years and up. Acuneb, the Namebrand, is the only one that's received the FDA approval for ages 2 and up. But it's manipulated by the insurance company. We're not going to pay for one because it's off-label, but we'll pay for the off-label generic because it's cheaper. It's also more toxic and less efficacious. And if you'd like to hear a little bit more about Xopenex, you can go back to my video on isomers and enantiomers. Is this good or bad? Well, when the insurance companies are manipulating it to deny care, it's probably a bad thing. As a physician, it's part of the nature of what we do, and you need to be aware of how things are FDA approved. You need to be aware of what the approval stamps are that have been given to a given drug, and you need to be aware when it's off-label, and you need to be aware when off-label is appropriate. As a pediatrician, a lot of what we do is off-label. That does not mean it's experimental. It's just not been approved by the FDA. The perfect example is giving generic Albuterol to a 2-year-old, even though it's not been FDA approved. Or better yet, giving Xopenex, the less toxic single isomer, to a 2-year-old, even though it's not been FDA approved. Or giving Xopenex or Albuterol to a 6-month-old, 9-month-old, 1-year-old in status asthmaticus whose airway is closing off because they need it to keep themselves alive, even though it's not been FDA approved. So I hope this has come and helped to enlighten you. For my students, yeah, this means you are in a malpractice bind, because if you don't give the drug and the patient has a bad outcome, you're in a world of hurt. If you do give the drug and the patient has a bad outcome, it was off-label. You better know the evidence. You need to know the evidence, i.e. you need to be spending time in the library or on a library. If I can be any assistance here in my office, we'd be happy to see you here or have you here for a rotation. Area code 775-359-7111. Again, I'm Dr. Kevin Windisch. We'll see you next time.